So now we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Let me welcome you all to this event to launch the book on powering a learning society during an age of disruption, which is co-edited by Mr. Sung Supra, Director of the Human and Social Development Division, South Asia Department, and concurrently Chair of Education Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank, Shanti Jagannathan, Principal Education Specialist with the Education Sector Group at Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at ADB, and Professor Rupert McLean, Adjunct Professor in the School of Education at RMIT University, Melbourne, Australia, and Adjunct Professor of the International Education at the University of Tasmania, Australia. This is a joint publication of ADB and Springer. Let me note a point made by Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz in his foreword, which is very important. This new approach recognizes that development is about more than closing the gap in resources that separate developed and developing countries, but closing the gap in knowledge as well. And more than that, the ability to learn and respond to the inevitable shocks and disruptions that confront the economy and society. Therefore, the book comes at a very critical juncture when we are all committed to build back better the education systems that have been disrupted in unprecedented ways by reimagining and rethinking education. Let me cite two quotes to demonstrate the importance of knowledge and learning. The first one is from Mahatma Gandhi: live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever. The second quote is from Albert Einstein: once you stop learning, you start dying. Such is the value of learning, and it's been there for such a long time. With rapid technological changes and impact of climate change, we see growing uncertainties, which is often labeled as a VUCA world: vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Therefore, the growing emphasis on developing self-directed, lifelong learners who can navigate such an uncertain world and find their solutions. For this to happen naturally, it is important that all education institutions work in tandem by focusing on creating a learning society. We'll learn about the focus of the book and its implications. Let me start with requesting Mr. Kenichi Yokohama, Director General of the South Asia Regional Department at the Asian Development Bank, and Mr. Bruno Carrasco, Director General of the Sustainable Development Bank, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at the ADB.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, good afternoon, good morning, good day, everyone. On behalf of South Asia Department, let me thank you very much. And also, I'm happy, together with Bruno, to launch this book, Powering a Learning Society during an Age of Disruption, which is published by ADB. It is an edited volume of 21 articles and presents the views of leading experts on the role of a learning society in education and training. I'd like to congratulate Sun Supra and the co-editors, Shanti Jagannathan and Rupert McLean, for putting together such a versatile group of people to write about this topic. This book comes at a very opportune time with accelerating digitization, growing need for lifelong learning for job markets that keep changing at a rapid pace, disruptive technologies, and other demographic and environmental trends such as aging, climate change, etc. It has become critical that a learning society is actively supported. It has become more important now than ever before to strengthen the role of societies and communities in education. As COVID-19 shifted learning to the homes of students, it has become clear that we cannot ignore the role of societies in education. An effective learning society is the one where good opportunities for learning is available to all, irrespective of age, gender, race, and socioeconomic status. Whether young or old, everyone needs to be part of a learning society. As people stay longer years in the workforce, where skills required in the job market keep shifting, and skills and knowledge acquired in early stage education and training becomes obsolete quickly. A learning society helps us to adapt to new domains and work practices. This calls for multiple channels of learning, going well beyond traditional brick and mortar institutions. So ADB is privileged to have partners with an illustrious group of education thought leaders. The authors come from leading universities throughout the world, such as National University of Singapore, Oxford University, and Seoul National University. Prominent civil society organizations such as Pratham and Teach for the Philippines. Government initiatives like the Institute of Cyber Education. Illustrious global think tanks like Brookings Institution, professional education services agencies such as Australian Council for Education Research, large global providers of online education like Coursera, international organizations like UNESCO and ILO, European skills institutes like European Training Foundation and SkillMan, non-traditional skills providers like the National Skills Academy for Rail in the UK, private equity firms focusing on education such as Kaizenvest. So our thanks to this great group of professionals for contributing their time and energy to this book. Within ADB, this book presents an excellent collaboration between Operations and Knowledge Department, which is South Asia, and the Sustainable Development Climate Change departments. The authors have brought unique and valuable perspectives on the role of a learning society. The book tells us that many actors have to play a part in strengthening the fabric of a learning society. A robust learning society will make people of all age groups and different stages of life become active learners in passing through transformational changes and in coping with disruptions. And most of all, be engaged and be productive members of the society, thereby achieving the sense of self-fulfillment and happiness. I'd like to welcome all the participants in this webinar, thanking you for joining this session. And we would be delighted to hear your views and suggestions to the authors, co-editors, and the ADB. So we want to learn from you how to put these thoughts in our operations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ken. Good afternoon. I'm very delighted to join Ken, Rajesh, Sunsup, Shanti, Rupert, and many colleagues in this book launch event. Through this book launch, we have gathered today not just the co-editors and authors, but many of the education experts in ADB. I've had the opportunity to leaf through the book, and I am very impressed with the excellent collection of expert views on the importance of a learning society combined into this publication. I want to, like Ken, congratulate Sunsup, Shanti, Rupert, and all those who have contributed to this book. I had a chance to leaf through the book, and I recommend it to all, not just education experts, but also those who have interests in developing learning societies a key theme throughout this book. With COVID-19 bringing the great disruptions that we have observed, policymakers are compelled to think about reshaping education. This is certainly a very important agenda across the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department and in ADB as a whole. ADB and other development partners are indeed committed to refocusing attention and resources into what we refer to as reimagining education and training, and particularly to suit the learning styles of millennials and Generation Z. And of course, to meet, more importantly, the needs of future societies. I believe together with Sunsup, we are part of the baby boom generation. And although now some generations back, I do appreciate how the concept of learning has evolved over the years. As part of our regular work, ADB has published a guidance note on COVID-19 and education in Asia and the Pacific that recommends going beyond the immediate COVID-19 crisis and to initiate far-reaching reforms that would make education more resilient. We are increasingly made aware that as part of what we refer to as Solutions Bank, and to be more effective and client-centric in supporting our developing member countries, we need to look at the future. Think of projecting 5 to 10 years out and ensure that our countries are indeed better prepared to face the challenges and build successfully on these challenges for a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient Asia. I often remind many of my great SDCC colleagues that we need to better understand today, tomorrow's problems. This guidance note that I refer to frames actions to be taken in 3 R's: response during the closure of education institutions, recovery when institutions reopen and try to make up for the lost time, and rejuvenation, where institutions undertake long-range reforms to modernize teaching and learning with new tools. Developing human capital across improvements in health and education is what it's all about. The Human Capital Index update of 2020 stresses how essential it is to protect human capital in the face of COVID-19. Simulations conducted for this 2020 report of the Human Capital Index suggests that school closures combined with family hardships may indeed affect accumulation of human capital throughout the current generation of school-aged children and lifetime earnings, reflecting on that capital accumulation relative loss. This is what economists refer to as a scarring phenomenon. As in poverty alleviation, the adverse impact of the pandemic can can erase many hard-fought gains in education through the previous decades, suggesting that the pandemic may roll back many years worth of human capital progress. So rising from this crisis requires, therefore, a broad range of partnerships, and that is what this book stresses, among others. Another key aspect of the long-range reforms is about education policies using a multi-sector approach for better impact. The right skills and talent can be powerful drivers of growth and prosperity in a knowledge-based economy. A multi-sectoral approach is strongly advocated in ADB's Strategy 2030. Societal changes tend to be interdisciplinary and require participation of different partners. I am a strong believer in a multi-sectoral or multi-thematic solutions to address many of the complexities that we face in today's developing countries, and in particular, some of the complex development challenges. At ADB, we support our developing member countries in the sectors of education, health, urban development, transport, climate change, energy, water, agriculture, and finance. And increasingly, we aim to connect the dots and tap the synergy across these sectors and themes to build equitable and more prosperous economies and societies. At ADB, we constantly stress the importance of knowledge solutions with a one ADB approach, which brings together key internal stakeholders across sectors and developed through diverse thinking. Lifelong learning for constantly aggregating new developments and lessons in an age of automation to enhance human capacity with up-to-date knowledge, skills, and attitudes matter far more now than we ever understood. it is really heartening to see that Sunsup and the co-editors have produced this book with an impressive group of professionals from many different walks of life. We congratulate all of them, and we emphasize the need to do much more of such work. In reading parts of the book, I was very impressed with some of the key takeaways. Some of the ones that I would like to share with you include, I think, what was referred to at the outset, the importance of investing in education and knowledge to close the gap between developed and developing countries. Another interesting point was the role of behavioral change and how not only individuals, but also organizations and institutions adapt to an ever-changing global environment. Perhaps another one is the idea of the importance of developing a culture of learning, and not just in schools and colleges, but across all walks of life, including in the workplace. So perhaps on that note, we come back to the common thread of learning as a lifetime journey. And with that, let me congratulate once again the editors and authors and all those involved in preparing the book. A big thanks to them to join forces with us in analyzing and unpacking the building blocks or pathways to a future learning society. I very much look forward to taking this dialogue forward in ADB and with our partners. And I warmly welcome all the participants to this webinar and look forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken and Bruno, for your remarks and underscoring the importance of learning, lifelong learning, and also setting the stage for the rest of the program. Let me now call upon the co-editors of the book to share their thoughts briefly, starting with Sungsup, then Santi and Rupert. Floor is yours, Sungsup.
Thank you, Brajesh. Also, thank you for Ken Yokohama and also Bruno Carrasco, 2DG, for insightful and excellent opening remarks. That already capture the gist of the book, so I don't have not so much to say. But when COVID-19 pandemic, that when it broke out last year, it was to us like wake-up call, and also for the developing member countries of ADB. Developing member country are now looking for remodeling and re-engineering education and learning system, and look into ADB, searching for a new solution. In search of solution, we reached out policymakers, practitioners, and also academic professionals. 40 thought leaders joined us. The book is outcome of 40 authors with 21 chapters. I noticed that there have been more than 27,000 plus downloads from Springer. So this book became very popular. I would like to thank contributing author Santi and Rupert, co-editors, and support from the Mr. Yokohama and also Mr. Carrasco, 2DG, and publication technical team from ADB and Springer. With this book, we try to find a way to address 4 key challenges. First, widening learning gap. Over the last decades, our developing member country and ADB have been investing in education, and there have been significant improvement in terms of access to school, but it doesn't translate into closing learning gap between urban and rural, and also haves and have not. Attending school does not necessarily mean learning. India, for example, according to a National Achievement Survey, about more than 1/3 of the grade 3 students cannot understand simple text or do math expected at that grade. The proportion of students who cannot perform grade-specific reading or math increase at higher grade. Children who fail to learn to read and compute at grade 3 are likely to stay behind, even when they advance to higher grade. Second, quality and relevance of learning. The world is changing rapidly, and with digitalization and automation, skills demand and nature of work are changing rapidly. With these rapid changes, whatever we learn in school will become obsolete very soon. But schools have not kept this pace. Third, multidisciplinary approach, as the DG Bruno also mentioned. As we can see from the COVID-19 pandemic, societal challenges such as climate change, environmental degradation we face require multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary, collaborative approach to solve. First, lifelong learning. We need to promote a culture of learning where continuous and lifelong learning are promoted. In the context of rapid changes and also uncertainty of future market and societies, it will be even more critical to promote learning how to learn, learnability and learning as agility to develop and build new skill will be crucial attribute in the learning society. These are very daunting challenges. School alone cannot address these challenges. Schools cannot be lone frontier. Enterprise, local and regional authority, research institution, apprenticeship, and most importantly, local community, starting from family, need to contribute, create, and support the weight of the societal learning. As one of approach to help address these challenges, this book highlights the importance of creating, empowering a learning society. In learning society, all actors in the society, including not traditional actors, such as city planner, technology companies, etc., should play pivotal role in improving the quality and relevance of learning as a lifelong journey. Integration of a learning opportunity among private and public actors would be key for developing learnability and reskilling. Firms and employers can also partner with education institutions to promote workplace learning. Education system need to focus on learning to learn to enable this lifetime learning. These all require a re-engineering of our society as a learning society. For this, we need to assess every aspect of society need and also public policy and practice through the learning lens. Not only the learning of individual, but organization, institutional learning as well. Advances in technology have enhanced the capacity of society to support lifelong learning. We need to take advantage of this advance in creating and supporting learning society. As Stiglitz said, we are very grateful for this, his forward into this book. This book represented a major step forward in the reorientation of development thinking. As the DG Carrasco mentioned at the beginning, this is a closing gap in knowledge, and also more importantly, closing gap in terms of the ability to learn, ability to respond to shock and changes. Again, thank you very much, all the co-author, all co-editor and authors, all contributing team. Thank you very much.
So, shall I go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Brajesh. Thank you, DGs, and hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. At first, I'd like to say it's been a great privilege and a wonderful experience working with this amazing group of authors who've contributed their thinking, ideas, and aspirations in the articles in the book. Reading through their articles, I learned a lot as they really cover a very wide and diverse range of topics and themes that bear influence on the future of education. I wish we could have had a day-long event with all the authors and co-authors, all 40 of them being able to share their thoughts and views. But since the pandemic, there's such a profusion of online events that it's very difficult to do day-long events. Instead, we hope that we can follow this event with more focused roundtables with groups of authors, unpacking some of the themes that have been covered in this book, and also looking at how to take forward this dialogue and not just leave it there. Like DG Bruno and DG Ken mentioned, the timing is particularly propitious for the coming together of this group of people from diverse settings to talk about education recovery from COVID, but also reimagining and rejuvenating how education can play a part in the future. Like Songsup mentioned, education is not just the sole responsibility of schools, the universities, governments, or public service agents. The book highlights that more than ever before, education is everyone's responsibility, and we need to have that kind of a long-range thinking to reap the benefits of investing in education and bringing impact on individuals and societies. So, in this journey, the role of traditional partners like schools, colleges, and stakeholders like teachers, and as technologies change, as societies change, they need to become more agile agents in a future learning society. At the same time, other actors, like those mentioned by the speakers before me, whether it's civic and municipal authorities or urban planners, transport professionals, CSOs, they all need to step up their game in contributing their expertise, their knowledge, and their work in helping to make education work not just for children and youth, but also for mid-career people and for older people who will now be looking to stay longer and longer in the workforce. So, learning society of the future, we need to also bridge this whole physical and virtual systems bridge as a systems gap, and ensure that it supports people in different stages of life, in different geographic settings, and also different phases of the working career. So cultural systems like museums, libraries, art galleries, sport facilities, they all are going to have a growing role to play in supporting education systems. So it's not just about technical knowledge that matters, but also how citizens find themselves in the larger fabric of a learning society, how they can build and nurture their skills and talents in different areas that will matter more. Employers are increasingly looking for people who are multifaceted. We've heard about multiple intelligences, right, in education. Howard Gardner has written about 8 different types: linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical, kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, naturalist. So nurturing these types of multiple intelligences require many institutions to play a part and to join this kind of journey in keeping education at the front end of development. So in many ways, education has to play a lead role, has to lead the change. So if for that to work, a learning society with everyone involved becomes even more important. So these are exciting times, and I'm very happy to be part of this effort together with all the other education enthusiasts who joined us in this book. Thank you so much. Over to you, Rupert.
If we look at the essence of this book, as many have pointed out, what we're really concerned about is looking at the development of learning societies at a time of major disruption in our various countries and in fact worldwide. That's the first thing. The second is we're looking at the reorientation of development thinking. In the past, development thinking has mainly stressed looking at reducing the resources gap between countries, between developed countries and developing countries, the income per capita in countries and trying to reduce the gap between wealthy countries and countries that haven't got the same sort of economic basis. But what we're looking at in this book is the need to look at a different way of looking at development, to look at the matter of closing the gap in knowledge between countries during a time when we have the information age and we have knowledge societies and economies. And this requires us to adopt a major reorientation of development thinking. And this is stressed by Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz in his foreword to the book. So we need to look at what we can do to promote learning societies. And when we look at learning societies, we want to make sure that learning is for everyone, regardless of age or gender or regional location, that is relevant to the needs of individuals and their communities, that is high quality, that is equitable, that it's inclusive, and this also, and I think it's very important to say, ethically based. So these are all areas that are very important that need to be accommodated when it comes to the changing patterns of learning societies. We need to look at how we can strengthen and upgrade education and training to fulfill the sort of vision we have of the type presented in the book. Now, we have all gone through all countries and individuals have gone through major disruptions. But we're mainly stressing, I suppose, in our presentation today, perhaps so far, the question of the COVID-19 health pandemic. And that's had an impact on education and training. It's an impact on how we deliver education. Many students no longer attending classrooms, but having to be homeschooled, for example. The increasing use of technologies and things of that type when it comes to reaching learners. But we have to also remember that there are many other areas of disruption that have a major impact on learning societies and on the way in which we organize education and training. There is the information and communication technology revolution, which is really impacting enormously the various countries. We have the fourth industrial revolution, which is having, again, a great impact on what we need to teach in education and training and the way in which we deliver that education and training. We have Industry 4.0, the changes in the business sector in the light of the fourth industrial revolution. We have the increasing and disruptive impact of artificial intelligence. Also the greening of economies and societies, and an increasing emphasis on equity issues and inclusive education. All of these things are highly disruptive and really require us to rethink what we need to be achieving in education and training. So in looking at this, we have to stress the importance of partnerships. Education and training are too complex and too important to just be left to governments. We can't expect them to be able to achieve all the things that need to be achieved. We have to look at partnerships that involve parents, learners, civil society, the business sector, the international development community. And fostering productive partnerships is extremely important if we're going to achieve the benefits of learning societies. It's also important that education and training is lifelong, and a number of other speakers have referred to that it recognizes the importance of adopting a holistic approach to education and training. So we involve not just formal, but non-formal and informal learning as well. So these areas of disruption, which are examined in the book, have a profound impact on education and training and on the characteristics and content of learning societies. So I think the book is on a very important topic. I believe we've drawn together a very talented, expert, experienced range of authors who provide very many insights and directions on the best pathways to adopt in future. How can we most effectively prepare our citizens? How can we most effectively meet the needs of our communities when it comes to the future of learning societies in all countries, whether they are developing or developed? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sungsup, Shanti, and Rupert, for shedding light on how this book is organized and sharing some of the key messages coming out of this book. Now, let me shift to the expert panel. We have two experts today, Professor Moritz van Roosen, Chairman of GISMA's Board of Governors and Chief Academic Officer of Global Systems at Global University Systems, and Mr. Living Wang, Chief Section for Educational Innovation and Skills Development at UNESCO, to share your expert views. Let me also remind the audience, while the experts are sharing their views, please put up your questions on the Q&A box so that we can, when we move to that section, we can have more lively discussions. So now the floor is yours, Professor Roosen.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this exciting launch of a very important publication. And thank you very much also for your introduction. Greetings from London, Global University Systems. I'm the Chief Academic Officer of that. I'm kind of the person who put that together. Is based in London, UK, the headquarters, and that's why I'm here. But as you said in your introduction, I'm also the rector of University of Europe for Applied Sciences in Germany, and a board chairman of GISMA in Germany, and a few other positions. So actually, I divide my time between the UK and Germany. But originally, I'm from halfway, the Netherlands, and started my academic career as a proper academic at Utrecht University, and then at a number of other institutions. But most of my career has been in management positions in universities, and that gives a bit of a color to my reaction to this publication. So first of all, I want to say this book gives me a lot of hope and reasons to be cheerful. And I want to thank the 40+ authors who have contributed to it. And let me explain to you why. I'm going to make a couple of 3 or 4 main statements. First of all, a very obvious one, but something which is often forgotten, and that is learning is the lifeblood of the knowledge economy. Lifelong learning has been referred to many times. It's an old concept, rightly so. I think, if my memory serves me well, it dates back to something like the 1980s, and then was taken to the political forefront, especially in the 1990s and onwards, by people like Jacques Delors, the then president of the European Commission, who really said lifelong learning is the future for any knowledge economy. It's our key to prosperity. Looking at that way, given all the words which have been given to promote lifelong learning by politicians and others, you could say it's not been a big success so far, otherwise we wouldn't have this session. But maybe that's misleading, because it also means we actually look at lifelong learning in a very narrow way, and that is linked to formal learning. And as the point is rightly made by previous speakers and in the book, really non-formal learning, informal learning represents 90+%. I mean, some colleagues have estimated that well above 90% of all the learning in society. So when it comes to why knowledge economies have developed, actually probably the answer to that, you have to look much more into the non-formal and informal education. Employers, many employers have embraced the learning concept. They know that learning is their key to the success of their business. They cannot prosper in modern society without actually investing in learning of their employees and of their company as a whole. And of course, the same is true for those who work. It's very difficult nowadays to be successful in a career without embracing the fact that you continuously have to learn, not just formally getting new pieces of paper, but also informally. And many of us have gone through this process in terms of, trying to understand the quick developments on all the different video conferencing systems and so on, which is really also a form of learning. Those who could not do that, unfortunately, will certainly not be at this session, right? So it's essential to stay in touch and to continue moving forward. Universities and colleges have not maybe been always that effective in addressing that, and you cannot blame them. They are focused and they are funded on really preparing young people for a career. That's really their main focus. So private providers have been filling that vacuum. So especially private providers have been very, very active in the non-formal and informal learning. And of course, they do have the advantage of economies of scale. Now, with the COVID situation, EdTech has received a major boost, and the acceptability of also getting your knowledge much more online really will help further that process of informal and non-formal learning outside the traditional classroom. And that links into another very important thing, and that is globalization. I've said this many times, and I cannot fail to repeat it again. Education is not, nor should wish to be, immune to globalization. Knowledge is global. It is very difficult to monopolize knowledge in a modern world. That is actually a very positive statement, because it's also an opportunity, for instance, for developing nations. And Rupert made a comment about that as well, and rightly so. That really, through learning, we can create a much more level playing field in social economic terms in the world. Of course, there is protectionism. There will be protectionism in some areas, though history so far has shown that protectionism, especially by nation states and up to a certain extent also by big multinationals, pharma industry, etc., tend to be more delaying the spread of knowledge rather than really truly monopolize it in a big way. Linked to that is the point of learning as a means to liberalize, especially in a social economic context, right? So it is both at nations, it's also at individual level. And in that sense, for those who actually feel knowledge, maybe in learning in particular, teaching is a way to control, this can also be a little bit triggering some anxiety. It is disruptive to society. And in that sense, there is an understandable, but I think not really defensible, pushback when it comes to the way learning is spreading through society. I will not go too much into that detail, but I think we all know that that's for some politicians, ideologists, or religious leaders, and so on, knowledge, learning, etc., can also be seen as a threat. My view on that is that if you try to frustrate learning in a society, you hamper the prosperity of that society, and that triggers frustrations. And I think history has shown that most of the time that has proven to be very risky for leaders. So I hope that leaders around the world actually are enlightened and embrace the importance of learning in the development of the knowledge economy. Globalization means that we can also create a much bigger scale. It therefore becomes much more affordable. And of course, the emerging lingua francas in the world, and especially English, that's a feature of globalization. does facilitate that enormously. It means that learning more and more, and the point has been made very well in the book and also today by some of the other speakers, is it's escaping the classroom. It is escaping history even. So the idea that learning is always teacher focused, teacher centric, professor centric is a very archaic idea. Community of learners is much more the future, with professors much more as facilitators. And very importantly, the concept that learning is something you do to prepare for life, and which stops at the age of, well, depending on what life you have been given, at the age of maybe 15, 16, maybe 23. That's a totally dated concept. And that historical force, which still tries to keep learning very much locked up in a classroom and locked up in certain age groups, is definitely on the way out. And in that sense, as I said, this book gives a lot of hope. None of this is triggered by COVID-19, but it certainly has accelerated this development. It accelerated the EdTech as a tool. It has accelerated the globalization of learning and the liberalization of knowledge. So in summary, learning is the lifeblood of the knowledge society. The book makes this point extremely well. There are very powerful drivers behind learning society, the emerging learning society, and they are not actually the ones you might expect to see. It is not really that much driven by politicians, whatever they say. It's actually much more driven by business, which have a vested interest in embracing this. It's driven by individuals who have vested interest in embracing this. And governments can, though, play a very important role there, and that is removing regulatory obstacles. I mean, there is a lot of rules and regulations in society which are actually there to defend vested interest and certain forms of protectionism. And governments definitely can force those rules and regulations a little bit out of the way, liberalize there as well. Because that actually will help enormously in stimulating the knowledge economy. And then, of course, finally, but certainly not last, the importance of globalization in all this, that we do not want to contain learning as purely as a nation state dimension, but that we see that actually we can benefit in this sense from globalization, and globalization can create big opportunity for all. So those are my 10-minute comments. I want to say once again, thank you very much for this book. It illustrates in the various developments as featured in the chapters, that there is enormous hope and encouragement for the world and the role of learning in our knowledge economy. So thank you very much to the editors and all the authors. Thank you.
Living, please go ahead with your
Thank you.
Brief comment.
Thank you very much, Director Generals of ADB, colleagues, dear participants. Warm greetings from UNESCO, and thank you for the invitation to this book launch. A very good afternoon to all of you as we gather virtually today to celebrate the launch of an ADB-supported book on powering a learning society during an age of disruption. First, congratulations to all our 3 co-editors and each of the authors for this very timely and relevant work, especially as we face the ongoing challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has transformed the social landscape in all aspects of our life, including education and learning. Humans are born with the ability to learn, whether it is in the form of informal, non-formal, and formal learning. When the concept of lifelong learning or lifelong education was initially introduced, it was more for adults to continue their learning after leaving the school system, either for work or for life. But now lifelong learning has been expanded to cover all levels and the types of learning with diverse learning objectives and the modes of delivery, including online and offline learning, formal, non-formal, and informal learning. We know that lifelong learning not only applies to individuals, but also to organizations, government, and our country. With diverse pathways and modes of learning, school and classroom-based learning, which was traditionally regarded as the formal learning, is no longer the dominant type of learning. We have seen increasing use of technology to enable online learning at scale, as well as work-based and community-based learning in the delivery of innovative learning programs. The landscape of higher education is also changing rapidly. Going forward, higher education and the TVET have an increasingly important role to play in strengthening our shared knowledge and educational commons for sustainable development. Universities house much of the world's potential for knowledge and research production, and require renewed investments to transform higher learning. UNESCO hopes to work with ADB and our stakeholders in these key areas to help nurture and transform tertiary education and learning. Today's publication shows us a broad and important way forward that lifelong learning is an integral part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is also echoed throughout the book. A key message regarding sustainability and our future from this book is that we need to shift our thinking and understanding of development from closing resource gaps to closing knowledge and learning gaps for learners worldwide. The role of diverse actors working towards a common goal of equitable access to lifelong learning opportunities for all is key to building a learning society, and is a major contribution of the book we are discussing here today. Drawing on this key message, UNESCO has called on stakeholders at all levels to reimagine our collective futures to achieve sustainable development through quality education. UNESCO's global initiative on the futures of education aims to catalyze this ongoing debate and actions to reimagine education as part of a broad, open, consultative process that involves youth, educators, civil society, governments, business, and other stakeholders. We believe this new book makes an important contribution to this global debate. This impressive book presents a collection of good policies and practices that will continue to resonate during the pandemic and into the future. UNESCO looks forward to facilitating that dialogue in the context of SDG 4. Together with ADB and all stakeholders, we need to accelerate progress towards SDG 4 in order to reach our collective aspirations across all the 17 SDGs. Together, we can build a new and inclusive learning society based on peace and prosperity for all. We are grateful for our collaboration with ADB and welcome this new resource as we shape the road ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was having some connection problems, so sorry if it didn't come out well. So thank you very much, Professor Moritz and Living, for excellent points. This program has already highlighted so many important aspects of a learning society and the interdisciplinary approach that is required to optimize learning. We'll come to that later on. I am cognizant about the time. We do not have a lot of time remaining. In order to sort of make it efficient, let me ask, I understand there are some colleagues who want to raise some questions. Let me start with Margarita Pavlova. Dr. Pavlova is from Education University of Hong Kong. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And it is such an exciting event. And every time ADB is collaborating with Springer, I think it's a perfect way to engage more and more stakeholders into knowing your work. So congratulations on that approach that you used over several years already. So, and of course, I fully agree that educational system is just one partner in developing learning communities. But my question is still about education and training. So can you comment on the path of change, education and training accommodate challenges and opportunities caused by COVID, for example, fourth industrial revolution, sustainable development agenda, to have a positive impact on learning societies? Or can you provide an example? So what are the evidence? Because you know this big picture, what is happening in the region. So maybe you can comment on that. And I know it's a very big question, but if you can provide one example, that would be very interesting. And I'm looking forward to read all parts of the book.
So who wants to take this question?
Maybe I can just start and then others can jump
go ahead,
in. So yeah, thanks, Margarita. Good to see you again. I'll just pick up on one point on the fourth industrial revolution. This is something that has been, I think, preoccupying so many of us. And there was all this, fear around this whole disruptive nature of the fourth industrial revolution technologies and then what it would do to jobs and what the market would look like. And so we've been doing a series of studies on that. And one of the things that we found, we studied about 8 sectors across 4 countries in ASEAN, and another one is currently underway in the Central West region. One of the key findings we found that, yes, indeed, these technologies are bringing disruptive changes, and they are bringing pressure on routine and routine tasks. So people who are doing routine on kind of automatable tasks are at risk of losing jobs. But at the same time, skills, investing in skills is the lever to benefit from the upside of these technologies. And across all these 8 sectors that we studied in the 4 countries, we came up with estimates of positive job creation from the increasing productivity that will come from investing in skills and from improving our knowledge around these things. And also another aspect which relates to the learning society concept is that it's no longer within the 4 walls of education institutions. Like on-the-job learning will play an extremely important part in this whole upskilling and reskilling. And this has also been proved by the COVID-19 experience of disruption, that we really need to be far more agile and far more ready to have investments from different actors. So in the interest of time, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Shanti. In the interest of time, I see, let me move on. Professor Thomas Schroeder from University of Dortmund, Germany. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Schroeder from Technical University of Dortmund. I'm holding the UNESCO Chair for TVET and Competence Development for the Future of Work. And thank you very much to ADB, to the editors and to the authors for, and I hope that this very meaningful piece of work will ignite a long overdue discussion on how to embed educational systems into the entire society and to provide something which will maybe change the mindset with respect to learning. We've heard this before. It's not only the structure, it's as well the way we should regard learning, didactical approaches, learning venues, etc., etc. My question is, from your point of view, from ADB's point of view, what do you think? How are the nations prepared to accommodate current major areas of disruptions, and on where do you see, or what do you think will be the role of TVET in this process. Thank you.
So, Sungsup, would you like to take it, or Shanti?
Maybe I take it very quickly. Thanks, the Professor Thomas Short, for excellent question. Yes, I completely agree that it's now time to change the culture of learning and change your mindset, not just on the physical investment. Your questions on how the society, nation really prepare for the shock and like disruption, and then particularly role of Tibet. Some countries really well prepared. For example, country like Singapore, they have a Skills Future initiative, whole of nation approach they're taking in terms of the learning. They are much more showing much more resilience compared to other countries. But in some country, a bit difficult to name it, but particularly Tibet sector, severely, I would say, disrupted it. Because in Tibet sector, usually the learning mode is usually face-to-face. Now we cannot have the classroom. So this one really telling us importance of the creating learning society, right? Not just only this one. I think the Professor Ruizin also mentioned in his view. He said that when we have a well-established learning society, we could resiliently respond to this. In fact, I completely agree that didn't happen. So I would say, difficult to say in the Tibet area, but I say in the less developing country, much more affected by Tibet in this sector than even formal education sector. So in coming back, in terms of even equality perspective, in terms of the societal impact, when I look at it, we have to really reimagine Tibet also learning system in light of this disruption we are facing. Hope that I can answer, satisfy some part of your answer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sungsup. Yeah, again, we are running out of time. Libing, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah.
Go ahead briefly. Yeah.
Just want to briefly respond by this very important question. As you know, that in the SDG global agenda, Tibet is more important, more visible than the previous Millennium Development Goals. Actually, the reason is very simple. Actually, literacy and numeracy is only the basis. But if a country would like to develop promote economic development, Tibet and higher education is more productive actually in producing the human resources needed for countries, to develop economically. So if you can compare the difference between Millennium Development Goals and SDG 4, you can see the difference, the high visibility on Tibet and higher education. So I think this is quite obvious. Thank you.
Thank you, Libing. Maybe last question from Dr. Leonie Wheeler from RMIT University, Australia. Please go ahead. Brief question.
Thank you very much, and I enjoyed taking part in writing a chapter and also the other chapters. In Australia, we have a growing, a small but growing number of cities that are learning cities, and rural communities that think learning is a driver of change. And we've got some really good stories coming out of our practitioners. But my question is, how do we get these stories out more to other communities, perhaps in our own nation, but also globally too? We have very dynamic communities who are going to have a global learning festival. That's one way, but what are the other ways that we can get these stories out?
Professor Moritz, you wanted to say something also earlier. Do you want to respond to this question?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a very good point, and I try to make a comment about that also in my contribution about how we are moving from traditional going to a campus, going into a building, going into a classroom, listen to the professors and then go out again, and now we have learned, or even just reading a book and having learned, into much more a community of learning. And that's really what is so important also in a rural context, which is that you create communities of learning, whether that's virtual communities or real communities. And the point is very well made, is that you have to approach this in a globalized world as a global thing. So it is, how can you link local learning communities, virtual communities or real learning communities with other local learning communities, etc., and create a global learning communities? And I think that is going to be the most exciting opportunity we have in the decades to come. So my own organization, Global University System, is very much based on the concept that you create an ecosystem at global level, but that's still in a slightly more formal context. And I think there is another big opportunity there for creating that global learning community by linking local communities. Why am I saying this? It's because we should not be afraid to share learning. I mean, there is sometimes an idea that we should defend our interest, and that and that's a lot of the way society is organized, is actually defending vested interest. In fact, the need for learning in society, in the knowledge economy, is so huge that there is not one provider or one government or whatever action which can actually fulfill that need. There is all kind of other actions which try to fill that vacuum. Corporate universities, why do corporate universities exist? We got already universities. Do they need to exist? Yes, they need to exist, because our traditional universities cannot provide that kind of knowledge for companies. That's why you get corporate community universities. The role of private providers I mentioned briefly, which is becoming more and more prominent because they have the advantage of economies of scale. You're absolutely right to flag up also the importance of community learning and how to connect those communities together. It's another way of all satisfying that massive needs for learning in order to be successful as a society, as also as an individual, right? A nice aligned interest. And there are many examples. I was very pleased to also get the question from Germany. There are many examples how it can be done with the dual system, for instance, where corporate and universities come together and really align their agenda on learning. But also maybe as an inspiring example at the end, one of the universities I was in charge of, a Dutch university called Nijrode, which had a very clear philosophy that when students graduated, they didn't leave the university. So they would stay with their alumni through all the stages of their career. They would see that as their responsibility, right? So you would always stay part of the university, and therefore the university would always try to provide you with not only knowledge and skills, but also connecting you with other people who have a similar interest in learning, and creating, independent community groups of alumni who would actually work together, etc. And I think this is a very powerful approach for even traditional universities without funding in place, and so on, really can make a big difference. And that is stop thinking of graduation as commencement, as you say in America, as the end point, but actually saying, no, you're staying with us as part of our community for the rest of your life, and we also accept responsibility on that. And by the way, it actually can be also cost recovery. It's another source of income, if you want to put it in blunt economic terms as well. So very good question. I think what you are showing is the future. Your question actually leads us focusing on the future, and that's very, very powerful. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Morris, for that comprehensive and very insightful response. With that, I think it's a good time to wrap up. I'd like to thank all the speakers for their excellent insight. I understand that this is just the beginning, but setting the stage right on this matter, and the team will continue to share and discuss and get more deeply into this topic. But I just want to say that traditional learning is not adequate, which is coming out quite eloquently. The new generation of self-directed learners need to be exposed to different types of learning. There was also a reference to not limiting to classroom, and which we had looked at that. Also, different forms of education are already evolving, and some of the examples we heard. So going forward, I think the ecosystem approach becomes more important. The good thing is now we're talking about sustainable development goals, and this integrated approach, multidisciplinary approach is what we need to do. And for that, again, partnership becomes very important. So I think this learning society is the currency for now, which should take into account different important critical aspects and then come together. So this is a very optimistic view, as Professor Moritz also pointed out. Once again, thank you all for this. And audience, I know you may have a lot of questions, but if you have questions, please send that to us and we'll try to respond to those questions. But for now, thank you very much and take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah, all of you.